As always, it is a pleasure to chat with you. I know there's a lot happening right now. It's a very chaotic time, so I appreciate you joining us on the show. I want to dig right in here because obviously the chaos we're seeing right now in the Middle East, things have only intensified. What has this been like for you to watch and observe and just as an Israeli, see all of these things unfolding the way they are?
Well, I think we're in a moment of history that people will be talking about, maybe even for generations. In Israel, it's a moment we had 1948, which was the War of our Independence. We had the War of 1967. And of course, now we have 2025, where we're in another fight for our survival. If there's one thing the Jewish people have learned from the Holocaust to October 7th, it's when you have an evil regime threatening and promising to wipe you out and developing the weapons in order to do that, you have to take them seriously, because if you don't, it will be too late. And I think that's what we're seeing now with Iran, not just a threat to Israel, but everyone knows they're a threat to the Judeo-Christian values that we hold dear in America, in Europe, and even in the moderate Muslim countries in the Middle East. And so what we're seeing now is historic. If Iran is indeed wiped out, it will be a return to the godly values of the sanctity of life and the ability to bring a beautiful and hopeful future to our children without this huge threat of Islamic terror wherever we turn.
Well, and you bring up a very important point there, and I've been really pondering the last few days, just as this has unfolded, really wondering, October 7th was such a horrific day and so much happening around there. Obviously, still having hostages who have not been returned. It's absolute insanity. It's horrific. And you think about that, and that was really a manifestation of threats coming true. I don't know if you want to reflect on that at all, but it seems that Israel's response to Iran right now, in many ways, is rooted in that reality that people are willing, these terrorists have been willing to make good on these horrific threats against Israel. And October 7th proved that.
Yeah, Hamas, before October 7th, was both saying, we want our independence, and Israel left the Gaza Strip, gave them basically a Palestinian state. There wasn't one Jewish person in the Gaza Strip. And Israel even started letting in Palestinians to work in Israel, where they were getting around 10 times the salary that they were able to get in the Gaza Strip. They were working in the hospitals. They were working in high-tech hubs. They were working in homes of people. And then what we saw on October 7th was when their charter says that they want to destroy Israel, it doesn't matter if Israel is trying to do good things for them or give them hope for the future, or moving Jewish people from their homes so that they can have a state, or inviting them in to work and have a good salary to support their family. Their charter says they want to destroy Israel. And so that's what they are doing. And we see the same thing when it comes to Hezbollah in Lebanon, who's been arming for years, for centuries. I mean, at least since 2006, decades, excuse me, since 2006 Second Lebanon War, they acquired more missiles than ever before. People estimate over 100,000 missiles. And what we saw was they're ready to use it against Israel. They want to destroy Israel. We see the same thing in Yemen. We see the same act repeated across the Middle East of trying to destroy Israel after years and years of promises that they'll do so. And so when Iran is on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon, that's the red line. We want to survive. Israel needs to take these threats seriously and do whatever needs to be done, which is very, very painful here in Israel. But we have to fight for our survival.
Well, let's talk about some of that pain and how the fellowship is helping alleviate some of that. Right now, you have a situation where obviously Israel and Iran are trading, missiles and attacks. And what is interesting is Israel is very much, from what we can see, precision, going after military. You have Iran seemingly sending rockets wherever into populated areas without really seeming to care about where those are going. So very different war tactics, but the effect of that on the people of Israel. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground and how the fellowship is stepping in to help.
100%. Israel is targeting those people who are calling out day and night, death to Israel, death to America, and establishing nuclear capabilities in order to bring that that promise to fruition, that dream to fruition. Iran is launching 3,000-pound missiles, ballistic missiles, into residential areas. And so the fellowship is the first responders in Israel when it comes to humanitarian aid. As soon as a rocket lands, as soon as it destroys somebody's home, unfortunately takes lives, the fellowship is there to help support the family. Of course, the government of Israel takes these evacuees and puts them in hotels or different places so they'll have a roof over their head. But it takes time until the bureaucracy is worked out and they could actually be repurchasing all the items that they lost in an instant. So specifically in Bat Yam, for example, where we saw many children killed and over 6 blocks of buildings affected by this huge ballistic missile that had a direct hit. These people don't have a toothbrush. They don't have shoes. They don't have a shirt. They don't have pajamas for their children. And so the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is there for every single one of the families, thousands of them, to provide that first response aid when the rocket hits. We provide them both with cards so that they could do emergency shopping before they have to deal with any of the bureaucracy. We're bringing meals to poor elderly in the area. We went to go visit a elderly yesterday whose windows were cracked from the impact of the rocket. She's sitting alone in her house. She doesn't have children. She's old and not well. And we went in and we brought her meals and put meals in her freezer. And she was crying. And she said, I felt so alone. I didn't think anyone remembered me. And I thought this was the end. And so it's this feed the hungry, clothe the naked, shelter the poor that we learn from the scriptures that's more relevant now than ever before in my lifetime.
You know, you've got to be exhausted. Your organization, you in particular yourself, being on the front lines of this sort of relief. I mean, you go back to obviously well before October 7th, but these major events that have happened, these historic events, October 7th, now you have this crisis. What gives you the energy to continue persisting on and fighting on to help those in your country who are in need?
I was just thinking about this last night. I was up at 2:00 in the morning with my house shaking. There was a direct ballistic missile hit around just a few blocks away, and my house was literally shaking. And I was staying with my kids and my husband, and I'm going out to the field and I'm doing all this work for the fellowship. And my husband asked me the same thing: where do you get the strength from, Yael? And I went over the past 6 years since my father died, and I stepped into this role of president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And we had my father's sudden death. We had Corona crisis, where the fellowship was bringing food to elderly when they couldn't go out to supermarkets and get the basics. We had the war in Ukraine, that I was on the ground in Kiev setting up emergency food and medicine centers just a few days before Russia invaded on February 24th. We had October 7th, where the fellowship was on the ground ready on October 8th, distributing life-saving aid. And now we have these Iranian attacks. And I think for me, what it comes down to is it's not easy. It always comes from a place of fighting with God and losing, and then stepping up and saying, Hineni. It's a biblical word, a Hebrew word that means, here I am. That I think when we are in a position, especially during crisis, to be able to help others, when we're able to bring some light to other people's lives, some hope to their hopelessness and despair, and especially when we're able to bring them food when they don't have, clothing when all their belongings were destroyed by missile. We're placing over 100 bomb shelters. We started yesterday under rocket attack, placing bomb shelters in the poorest neighborhoods in Tel Aviv and Haifa, which are most targeted by Iran. When you have the ability to be there and say, comfort, comfort my people, and provide that life-saving protection, how can you not?
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And right now, I would imagine there's some fear in Israel. I would imagine that the uncertainty of it does create some uncomfortableness. Can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing on the ground in terms, and even yourself? I mean, you just described a situation of being up at 2 a.m. with your kids and your husband because a bomb hit a few blocks away. That could have been your home. I mean, how are you dealing with those emotions that are just human nature?
Yeah. Well, everything in Israel right now is shut down because it's too dangerous to go out. I'm an essential worker, so I go out to the scene of attacks and I'm going around. But my children don't have school. All schools across the entire country of Israel, which is the size of New Jersey, have been closed since the first Iranian missile hit. All non-essential businesses are closed. And we're just sitting and waiting for the rockets to strike. This morning when I woke up early and I was giving I have kids ranging from 18 and a half to 9 years old for them. And my 9-year-old, I was feeding him breakfast and he said, "Roo." I said, "What are you doing?" Normally for a 9-year-old, that's the sound of a fire truck. He said, no, that's the sound of a code red siren. There's a rocket coming. We have to run to the shelter. And he was just processing it all. And I looked up to God and I said, bring comfort to your people, because we're the lucky ones. We're in good shape. Our home, thank God, hasn't been hit. But just the idea of you're running to shelter many times a day when you feel physically the impact of these missiles. And even if they're intersected by the Iron Dome, which hasn't been able to intersect all of them, you feel that impact and the shrapnel still falls. My children, all of them have, before the siren went off, they look up at the sky and see 100 Iranian missiles flying through the sky. They know they're being targeted for being Jewish. This whole country is being targeted simply because we're Jewish, because we represent the values of God, because we sanctify life, which is something that these terrorists hate. And so I think that's what gives this entire country the strength to be resilient and go on, is we're representing God's values, the values that America holds dear, these Judeo-Christian values that Jews and Christians sanctify, hold dear. And whatever the price is, we're willing to pay it because it's something that can't be wiped out, that darkness cannot win.
Darkness cannot win. That's a powerful statement, because I do think that there's a lot happening right now. A lot of Christians are talking about prophecy and wondering what's going on and looking back to Ezekiel and all of these conversations. Even the regathering of Israel has been a really big, in 1948 has been a very big point of conversation in many evangelical circles in particular this week. When you reflect on all of that and you think about all of that and just this moment of history that we're in, that feels very much more than just, and I'm not saying that prophecy is unfolding before us, but what I am saying is it feels much more than just a political, social, cultural event. It feels heavy. What goes through your heart and your mind as you process all of that?
That I was brought here for such a time as this, that God has his hand on this land. Israel is different than any other land in the world. It's the only place that God himself gave a name to. It's the only place that the prophets spoke about, that the Jewish people returned to. And historically, there's never been a people, a nation that was in exile for 2,000 years and then reunited with their home, reignited this biblical language that they spoke. It's something that Jesus spoke, that he walked these streets, keeping the feasts that he kept that were directly from the scriptures. It's something that we keep alive here. And I know this is part of God's plan. And I do think this is biblical prophecy unfolding. I don't know what will be. I don't know how it will play out, but I know that it's been foreseen. I know it's been foretold. And I know that ultimately it would be good, that it will be good, because I believe God is good. God is mercy. God is kindness. And so if this is the pain, maybe you could call it birthing pains before the birth of joy and celebration, then I think it's something that Israel is needing to face right now. But I believe, again, if we succeed as global warriors of faith to wipe out the Iranian Islamic regime, and not only to free the Iranian people, of course, who had freedom before 1979, who want freedom again, but to free the entire free world from being held by a noose, with a noose around our neck by this Islamic regime that's exporting terror and funding terror everywhere we look, that's targeting Americans, that's targeting Israel. If we succeed in knocking out this threat, it will be a new time full of light and joy and celebration, because it means our children won't have to face that.
Well, you read my mind because I was going to ask you. We've had reports from other organizations that Iranians were in the streets celebrating when Israel, launched the preemptive attack. That they were happy. That there were many people in the country that were happy because they are looking for that freedom. Have you heard anything like that? I'm just curious what you've sort of heard from your perspective.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard exactly the same thing. And I know the Iranian people are hurting right now. There isn't fuel. They're under, attack on these nuclear facilities and all the military infrastructure that Iran specifically put in many civilian neighborhoods. That the Iranian people are having it hard right now. But for the first time since 1979, they have hope. I've seen videos of women tearing off their hijab and screaming in joy as they watch the Israeli missiles come down on these military facilities. I've seen men singing songs of hope and faith as, an Israeli F-16 flies overhead. This isn't the same as Iraq or Afghanistan, because in Iran, before 1979, they were a modern, progressive country that had freedom for its citizens, that was very educated, that was part of the global world working towards progress and hope. They still remember that. They still can taste that. And so I think what they're waiting for is for the mullahs to be of the past and for them to join this global movement, just like the countries of the Abraham Accords have joined, of freedom, of hope, of sanctity of life. It comes down to that. Those who sanctify life versus these death cults that are chasing death.
Final question for you. If people want to get involved, help the work that you're doing at the fellowship, where can they go to do that?
Thank you so much, because the aid is needed now more than ever. I've never seen more families so desperate for something as simple as a prepared meal. And we're getting calls every single day of people begging us to place more shelters in their neighborhoods to keep them safe. And we're also seeing how these investments last long beyond this round with Iran. We've placed over 3,000 shelters in the past few years. Every single one of those shelters are saving lives now. And so by bringing hope and giving a donation right now to protect Israel and help Israel, it's not only helping now, but for many years to come. So every dollar helps, and you can get involved at www.ifcj.org.
As always, really appreciate your perspective and your time today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. God bless you.